Hello, listeners. We're kicking off another episode with our friends over at Mentorcam. As a reminder, Mentorcam gives you access to high-profile advisors and experts for one-on-one advice. For more information, go to codestory.co/mentorcam. That's MENTORCAM to learn more. Use the discount code CODE, CODE, all one word, to get 20% off your first mentorship session. Well, today I have another special guest on the Code Story podcast, Josh Campbell. He's a founder and CEO of Human Improvement. Formerly, he was a Starbucks executive and president of a cannabis wellness company. He's founded, funded, and built and exited multiple startups, and of course is passionate about mentoring. Josh, thank you for being on the show today.
Noah, thank you for having me.
Before we jump into building a brand, which is our topic for today, tell me a little bit about you.
Well, I'm a recovering accountant. I actually started my career not on an entrepreneurial journey. I started in the world of finance. I ended up getting a couple of finance degrees, and I thought that was the path to success, right? So you could work 100 hours a week and make some good money and then retire. I realized relatively early on in my career, I truly hated it. And I had a mentor of mine one time. We were sitting down building a financial model. He looked at me. He said, "You don't really love this, do you?" I said, "Absolutely not." He said, "What the heck are you doing this for?" So he said, "Get out of here. Go do something you love." And that was the impetus I needed to really jump out on my own. So I've had a chance to work in private equity, on buy side, on sell side. I've been really fortunate to make a lot of mistakes early and build a lot of great businesses. Probably built about $1 billion worth of equity over the years at multiple companies. And now, we're trying to move the world to sustainable nutrition with our Human Improvement brand.
You've obviously done a lot of really cool things. I love it that you said recovering accountant. I've never heard that before.
Finance is such a great language of business to know the fundamentals of. And I think you can take that language skill and then translate that to something that's actionable. What I found in the world of traditional finance is there's a lot of academics in it that would give advice to CEOs, but they've never actually done it before. And I thought that was incredibly hypocritical to be in that space. And it's certainly easier to be on that side of the fence and provide advice, but it's much harder to go out and do it.
Well, let's jump into the meat of today's topic. So building a brand. And my first question is very straightforward. How do you start building a brand? How do you get started building your brand?
Well, I think a lot of people think it's a logo. It's what your packaging is, and it's so much more than that. The brand is everything, every touch point that exists, and really the reputation of what you're creating. So it starts with figuring out who your audience is and what you're trying to build, first and foremost. It's that reputation you're laying out, the commitment, the promise you're making to the consumer. That's truly what the brand is. I think when you're starting off the journey, who do you want to be? There's people at the high end of the spectrum for sure, and there's people that do a phenomenal job at the lower end of the spectrum, right? And I think the disconnect is when oftentimes people think they're at the high end, but they're really offering a low end product or a value product, and you have a mismatch between service, price, and value.
So what is different about building a brand around an unconventional idea, right? So something that maybe is not the norm, but what is different about building a brand there?
Well, I mean, my whole career has been around taking stigmatized products or industries or categories that traditionally haven't had that touch, whether it's coffee, essential oils, cannabis most recently, or even insect protein. So my playbook, quite candidly, has been take a product that has high efficacy, that truly works, there's already a market need for the actual solution the product provides, and wrap it up with cool, sexy packaging and create a great experience for it. I've always been in that accessible premium category. I'm always jealous of friends that have brands that are in the discount category because their volume is so high. It can be such a better business sometimes. But for all the businesses I've had a chance to be a part of in that accessible premium, that's where it's worked really, really well. And provide a story, right? What's that narrative? What are you truly selling the consumer? A lot of people thought, for example, around essential oils, that it was all about woo-woo crystals and snake oil medicine, right? When in fact, we positioned it as no, truly a natural remedy, an alternative to Western medicine. And that was the hook that really came into it, right? So we offer people an alternative to something they're already used to. And that's a much easier route to go than saying, hey, we're creating an entirely new category for a problem you didn't really know you had. That's really, really tough. You're saying, hey, it's an alternative solution to something you already know is a big issue, and we're doing it at a better price or with a better experience that we're used to. That's a much easier entry point into the brand.
So there's something that you're not saying directly, but I'm extracting from what you're saying too, is that the product has to be something good, or at least the way that you've approached it. The product has to be something with efficacy, I think is the word that you used. And then the brand is what's built around something that's already good. You can't just build a brand around something that's bad. That won't work. Is that true?
I mean, people try that all the time. We see it time and time again. And I think it depends on when you say bad in what regard, right? Because there's a lot of, I mean, how many seltzers are out there right now, right? Taste is subjective to a lot of cases, right? So is it delivering the right taste for the right price in the right location? So you can have a poor tasting product, but if someone is looking for high alcohol content, for example, it might just work, right? I think there's a lot of spirits that fall into that category. And so it's all about finding that product market fit. But yes, the underlying rule is, your product can't be crap at the end of the day.
Okay, so for you personally, how has your traditional experience contributed to your entrepreneurial experience and your entrepreneurial backbone? You've been formerly, Starbucks executive, you're a recovering accountant, right? How has that contributed to how you've gone forward?
I think it's understanding kind of the language of business, as kind of quirky as that sounds, or cheesy as that sounds. It's understanding how to maneuver. One thing we often talk about with a lot of our early stage businesses is saying, okay, the problem we're solving for that buyer at a wholesale is different than what we're solving for the consumer. And understanding how you play in a large company is really important to understand that dynamic. We see this, quite a lot with companies we're scaling up. If we bring in someone who's used to having, $1 billion business under them and a huge team, they generally don't work out well in small stage early growth because the job they're doing is so dramatically different than what you're doing. You're, at a small stage startup, you're doing everything, right? And so it's much more dynamic. You don't have big team structures. You don't have the luxury of lots of resources. And so as you move up in an organization, you become really a resource allocator, a true manager, and less entrepreneurial in nature. So by earning my chops early stage in much larger companies, I think it gave me a really interesting perspective of then how to bring the right people into the teams that I'm built, and then how to work with those larger companies when we're in the the selling in phase, or we're partnering with them as well.
So, okay, comparing packaged goods versus digital products, right? When it comes to brand, is there anything different about building a brand for those, or is it the same?
I think it's very different. I haven't had much luck in the digital realm. I wish I did. I'm very jealous of my friends that have, services and products with no cost of goods. It would be lovely. No inventory issues and things like that. I'm a bit of a traditionalist where I love the idea of providing a product that someone buys, right? There's a physical benefit to it. And so the look, the feel, that is so important when it comes to with that product experiences as well. Also placement, where you're purchasing that, right? I mean, it's changing quite quickly as we look and say, well, all these different forms of delivery right now are dramatically changing the way products, especially in the CPG category, show up. But there's a lot more variables to think about when you're creating a product, physical product for someone versus just a digital product. That being said, with a digital product, you can put out 600 iterations in a week and test a whole bunch of stuff. You can't do that in the physical world, right? One thing we get a lot of businesses pitched and people say, here's what's going to work, here's what's going to sell. My overarching advice is print off a label, glue it onto your product, and go super old school. Don't waste all this time and money trying to make it perfect, because you never get it. Perfect is so subjective, especially in physical product. We always say, just print off it, tape it on, and see what people think. Make your own prototypes. It's not that hard. A great point is RX Bar that had a massive exit a few years ago. I think they used a PowerPoint for their first round of labels. There is a big benefit to be able to being a little cheeky like that. The other big thing is copywriting wins every time, right? So great copy will really help. Again, much easier to do in the digital space where you can quickly iterate and the system tells you if you're right or not. You don't get that luxury in CPG. You literally need to print it off, put it on the shelf, and in some cases watch. We've done that before. We've put mock packaging and just watch people interact with it. You learn so much by doing it.
So, okay, with physical products, right, is your world. What is different about selling a physical product, right, to retailers versus selling e-commerce, right? It seems like two totally different worlds. Can you speak to what's different between the two?
When you're selling through traditional retailers, you've got a couple of kind of stage gates. You often have a distributor you need to sell, so you need to convince a distributor to take your products on. Then you need to convince the buyer of that retailer to then take you on. And then you need to make sure it actually sells off of shelf. So the first two things are generally easier than that last thing. And each person has slightly different attributes you're looking for. So the distributor is going to want to make sure that you can get on shelf, that you can sell through, and there's enough margin for them. They're also going to want to make sure that your product's not too difficult to manage. So if you have things like frozen product, that's really tricky. Refrigerated is also really challenging to do in that category. Then the buyer of that retailer is going to want to look for a lot of things like, environmental concerns, which they give back, some softer attributes that they can then go internally to their team and say, hey, we were the people that brought XYZ brand in, and here's what we're doing for all these kind of corporate mission things. All really important, mind you, but buyers are typically more interested in some of those attributes than the end consumer is. Then when it comes to e-commerce, you're selling based on a quick image in many cases, right? And so what looks good on shelf doesn't always translate to the digital world and vice versa. We've tested a whole bunch of creative copy. For example, with our brand Human Improvement, we designed it to jump off of shelf. That means we made packaging decisions not to include certain copy because it's already sitting in the protein aisle. So we don't need to tell you it's protein. Well, if you're on Amazon, you do need to say that, right? People are coming in without that preconceived notion. You're not seeing it next to different, tubs of whey and things like that. And so understanding that context is really important. And we've made tons of mistakes in doing that. And we're still figuring it out. I'd say the other big thing is people think, retail's awful. You have, all these hands in the pot, which means your margins get degraded. And yes, they do, but you're also talking to a very attuned audience when you're going through. And so I see a lot of digital businesses that have a high gross margin, but terrible EBITDA margins because they spend so much money trying to get customers in. Whereas if you're selling into, say, a grocery store, well, you betcha all those people there are there to purchase, right? And so your decision becomes, or your goal is to then convince them to purchase your product versus someone else's. And so again, very, very different mindsets on it. I think, with e-commerce, you've got a huge ability to scale, right? You get paid generally pretty quickly within a couple of days. With traditional distribution, you can be waiting 30, 60 days to get paid in some cases and get all kinds of chargebacks. But you can also you can get to 6,000 doors overnight, right? You can try and get that on e-commerce, but it generally, from what I've seen, it takes longer. The other big factor is depending on the type of product you have. If you're selling a liquid product, it is really tough to sell that. If you're selling eyelashes or magnetic eyelashes or powders or supplements, that's a really great business for D2C. Small, lightweight, high margin products are fantastic for that. Whereas like big, bulky, heavy items certainly do sell online quite a bit, but the margins are really eroded by the cost that it's expensive to ship water at the end of the day.
So with the liquids, you have another brand that you've created, right? It's the Soge Rosé. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah, we launched that about a year ago now.
So with that brand, and you mentioned with the liquids, have you sold anything online or has it been all through retailers?
We actually originally launched the business as a joke. The business was with a good friend of mine, and it was designed to be a catalyst for conversation. I'm a straight Caucasian man. He's a gay Asian man. We're good friends, and we're saying, well, if everyone else can have the candid relationship that we do, the world would be a much better place. And so what better catalyst for conversation than a really strong rosé? And so we thought it would really just be D2C. We have a great partner that came on board to help us with it. And we quickly found that, yes, people will purchase online, but people are much more eager to say, can I just grab it at 7-Eleven when I'm going out on a Thursday? Can I just go to Gelson's and pick this? Can I get it at Publix? They wanted the ability to quickly purchase this product. And so we end up reverting back to the 3-tier distribution model that alcohol has in the US. That was a situation where even though our margins were okay because wine has pretty strong margins, shipping, the consumer demand was like, listen, I don't want to have to buy 4 or 5 bottles at once. I want to be able to pick up, a quick 4-pack from GoPuff on a Friday.
Well, Josh, thank you for being on the show today and talking all things about building a brand, sharing your expertise and your experience. I really appreciate you being on Code Story.
Thanks for having me.
Well, this concludes another great chat and expert advice from our friends over at Mentorcam. Check out all the great mentors and experts by going to codestory.co/mentorcam today. Make sure to use the promo code CODE, C-O-D-E, for 20% off.
You just realized your business needed to hire someone yesterday. How can you find amazing candidates fast? Easy. Just use Indeed. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other job sites. With Indeed sponsored jobs, your post jumps to the top of the page for your relevant candidates, so you can reach the people you want faster. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs posted directly on Indeed have 45% more applications than non-sponsored jobs. Don't wait any longer. Speed up your hiring right now with Indeed. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/PODKATZ12. Just go to Indeed.com/PODKATZ12 right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring? Indeed is all you need.